Welcome back, Idiot Squared viewers. This week, we're mixing it up. We're going to be discussing nutrition. What is food? Why do we eat it? And why does it matter what we eat to a degree? We're going to cover macros, micros, calories, all the things in between, the various levels, where you can approach this from, either top down or bottoms up, and what we think is a useful model, or even some useful models for dealing with nutrition and picking what you eat, how much of it you eat, and when you eat it. So we're going to dive straight in. Polska, you've been into weight training, nutrition, and those things for quite some years. How do you tend to view nutrition?
Like a relationship, guy. You got ups, you got downs, but the most important part is that you got to learn. You got to learn how to have. It's like food. Yeah, it is like a relationship in a way. And you just got to learn how to navigate that, because it's like anything, right? Like I've had my ups and bro, I remember preparing for comps, dude. And I would get like such an urge to just eat mad fucking junk food. And when I would crack, bro, it would be like game over, dude. It was unreal how much shit I could scarf down. Like I remember, you guys don't have Tim Hortons in Australia, but I know you've been there before when you went to Canada,
Yes.
right?
Do like Tim Hortons. The black coffee
Yeah,
is
dude.
lit.
So I think they burn it. I think every coffee shop is burning their fucking coffee, but for some reason it's mad popular in Canada, dude. You can't find a corner without a Tim Hortons for some reason. But I remember going there and just like, you get like 6 donuts, like 6 cookies and some other shit, and just boom, just hammer it all like in one sitting, like without even hesitating. And then instantly feeling mad regret and mad shameful. And then I've had moments where I was like on a 2.5 year vegan streak. We've talked about this before, where I only ate vegan, which was a terrible idea as well. So I've had like a lot of experience with different diets and different ways of eating. And I finally achieved having a good relationship with food, where now I mainly eat for fuel, to nutrient. No, fuck, I always fuck this word up. What is the word?
Nourish.
Nourish. Yeah, that's it. To nourish myself. But I feel like I've gotten to the point over the years where I don't need to like weigh shit and I don't need to like count shit anymore. I can visualize it because I've done so much training prior, where I can, look at something, I can tell you, yeah, that's more or less this many grams, not many grams of protein. And I know more or less like how much broccoli I should have and then how much rice as well. So that's where I'm at now, where I'm mainly eating what I need to, right? To recover, to feel good. And I don't really eat anything shitty anymore. I just don't have the cravings. Like once in a blue moon, but I just like, I don't drink any pop. I don't, consume any sugar. I don't fuck around. I don't feel the need to for some reason anymore. Like I said, I just achieved this healthy relationship, which took me a long time to get, bro, because there was a lot of years where sometimes I'd be trying to go to bed and I'd be thinking about Mickey D's or just drinking like a fresh can of Coke. And I was like twitching in my sleep, trying like, fuck, bro, like, God damn, I want some Mickey D's right now. You know what I mean? And sometimes I'd get out of bed and go get Mickey D's, bro. So it was nasty at times. Yeah. I think that's a pretty good answer, guy. What about you?
Yeah, I want to hit a couple things in yours, and then I'll get to mine. I think you nailed it when you said it's like a relationship. I think you've probably had a bit of a volatile relationship with food by the sounds of it. I've also gone through that phase for sure. Oscillating between the extremes. It's interesting though, like how you said, like over time you've developed a better one. Would you think, or do you think that correlates with your understanding of what food actually is? And sort of what the purpose of eating is. Like initially, I think a lot of us just think eating is kind of for enjoyment, right? Like we do it, for enjoyment, to feel good, to eat something delicious, etc. But over time, I would assume you've developed a better understanding of like things like what calories are, what macros are, like protein, fat, carbs, what your body needs those things for, like why you actually have to eat. Do you think that correlates with your developing of a better relationship with food?
like rationally speaking, it would, right? But in my case, it wasn't that way, because when I was studying nutrition for many years, like some of those years, that's when I was eating the worst. And a time after that as well is when I went really hard in the paint, bro, where I was eating like complete shit. And this was all around when I was preparing for comps. Like when I was like dieting for comps, right after is when I would have my biggest moments of eating like complete trash. And that's when also I would say when my understanding of nutrition was at its highest as well. But here's the thing, bro. Like, I think dieting for competitions is what fucked it up. And I think this happens to a lot of athletes. I've heard a MMA guy talk about this, that MMA guys sometimes will have horrible diets because they're so used to dieting for a time and then going off the diet and going back on and off. And people who compete tend to do the same, right? So I think like that extreme dieting for a comp just made my cravings go through the roof. And then once you just have a little taste, I mean, in my circumstance, like if I would just have like a little taste of something, boom, it'd be like an atomic bomb just blew up in my head. And now I would be like a fucking addict, do anything I could to get more and more and more and more. So knowing that, I always tried my best to not even see something, you know. I remember like my buddy ordered a pizza once. I had to leave the fucking room because I couldn't even be around it because it was that bad. So I think the extreme dieting made me like an insane person in terms of craving food.
Yeah.
And now that I haven't been training for competitions for a few years now, in that time frame is when have been able to sort of get rid of these cravings, go to sleep without thinking about McDonald's, and finally get to a point where I don't even think about it anymore. And it's because I haven't done any extreme form of dieting in many years. I will do some sort of dieting at times, but it's never extreme. You know what I mean? Like dieting for comp is fuck, dude. Like it's insane.
Absolutely. I want to I'll bring attention to it now. We'll put a pin in it because we'll get to this as we progress. But I think the key thing about that is nourishment, right? So I've dieted for competitions before and I've gone through all these, like extreme phases, and I've had that same experience. But when it was its worst was when I was consuming foods that were also nutrient poor as well as caloric restriction. So when I was restricting my calories, obviously you restrict your calories to increase the amount of fat your body can burn, because you're restricting the amount of energy you're consuming, forcing your body to burn excess energy on your body, which is stored as fat, right? But when I had the worst cravings when I was eating things like, steamed chicken breasts or boiled fish or steamed fish, white rice and just broccoli, right? So things that are inherently quite nutrient poor. They have the macronutrients, but they don't have lots of the micronutrients. And once I got a better understanding of micronutrients, right, actual, like the things you're eating to nourish your body, not just the macronutrients, but at the lower level, those micronutrients, I eliminated almost all of those cravings, even in the dieting phases. So I wouldn't have those rebounds or those oscillations between extremes as much as I did when I was just eating the foods that were like, nutrient poor and calorie poor, so to speak. So yeah, I want to put a pin in nourishment because we'll get to that. I think it's incredibly important, and how nourishing your body with things, not just the macros, but with the micros, can actually solve a large part of that craving and that insatiability for food. But then we also need to discuss about modern foods and how they're literally designed to get you to want to eat more. And the way that they do that is by taking out a lot of the macros and jacking up the calorie content of the food. And certain calories in specific ratios can be like crack for the human body and cause huge sort of dopaminergic responses. But yeah, you hit on a couple of good things. I'll answer your question or your initial question about, for me, I've also gone through that big oscillation. And for me, it did correlate with developing my understanding of nutrition. Now, I also went through those same big swings between extremes, like, the deep dieting phase for a competition, the binging phase, breaking a diet, etc., all of that stuff. And I was also studying nutrition at the time as well. But that was a superficial sort of understanding. The more time I've spent understanding the nuances, going down from that top-down level down into the bottom, the less oscillations between extremes I have, and the more of a consistent sort of balance point I've found. Another big one for me is not just understanding nutrition, but understanding sleep and how sleep affects hunger, sleep affects fat loss, sleep affects energy levels, sleep affects impulse control, and so many other factors. And then on top of that, not just sleep, but then understanding breath work, understanding light exposure and dark exposure. Making sure that each day you're getting ample amounts of light exposure early in the day, ideally natural lights from the sun, because you're getting a full spectrum. And then at nighttime, trying to get the darkest environment you can have for sleeping, and how big an effect that can have on fat burning, how you feel, and your impulse control. So it was not just understanding nutrition, it was understanding all of these things together in the space that they sort of create, and how utilizing all of those different sort of dimensions, you can achieve significantly better outcomes, and it ends up being quite easy, or it becomes a lot easier than just having to sort of, use self-control to not binge on things, if that kind of makes sense. But broadly, we can intro this now, which is you've got sort of two ways to approach nutrition. You can either go top down or bottom up. Now, the bottoms up approach is incredibly difficult because there's like computational irreducibility down there. Like there's just too many different things going on to sort of be able to build from, like understanding all the different vitamins, minerals, enzymes, cofactors, nutrients, all of these different things that are required for the human body, as opposed to top down, where you can sort of do it from that coarse grain level. And this is obviously, we've been doing observer theory, so we've been discussing coarse grainings and how we utilize them and how the models make it efficient for us to understand things. So I think we should approach this pod from like a top-down perspective and make our way down as deep as we can into the bottom or the depths of that computational irreducibility, because there are still some things we can say down there. So broadly, right, we need to eat as humans because we aren't self-sufficient within ourselves, right? We need to ingest energy from external sources to maintain processes within our body. And we don't just eat for energy, but we also need to eat to repair structures that make us or make our bodies, right? And so we can categorize these things into two different categories, which are essential and non-essential, right? There are things that we have to eat, we have to get from the environment, and there are things that we don't have to eat and we don't have to get from the environment. We can sustain ourselves. So calories are energy, right? So we eat for energy, but we also eat for nourishment or repair, things that can rebuild our bodies so that we can maintain our structures. That kind of makes sense? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So in the calorie space, right? Calorie is a form of energy. So every time you move your body, you think, you do just maintaining our bodies requires energy. Yeah. But it's not just the energy. We also have to maintain our structures. Now we need energy to help replenish those structures, but we also need the building blocks of those structures. Okay. So the essential things we have to eat from the environment to maintain our body structures are protein and fat, right? And we call these things macros, right? At a macro level, we call protein is a macro, fat is a macro, and they're both essential, right? Every cell in your body has protein and fat. Think of protein as like the scaffolding and fat as like typically it's the phospholipid bilayer, but it's also like a bit of an insulator. Yeah.
I felt that you were alluding to this. What is your argument for carbohydrates not being essential?
Carbohydrates aren't essential because we don't fundamentally need them to maintain or rebuild any structures in our body. At the base level, we're built from proteins and fats, right? Or not at the base level, right? At a certain coarse graining, we're built from proteins and fats. Carbohydrates are an energy source, right? They don't provide any structural support to the body. They're not used in any of the the structures that make us, right? But proteins and fats are. Okay, so that's why they're not essential. It doesn't mean that they're useless, right? They're an incredibly convenient form of energy, and we can get into that now just quickly. So if you hit your base levels of protein and fat, like if you consume enough protein and enough fat to maintain and repair your body structures, carbohydrates can be used to meet the caloric requirements of the body. Right? So say you have a high energy output and you're hitting your base levels of protein and fat, there could be a difference between the amount of energy you're consuming or burning in a day, the amount of energy your body is going through each day, and then the amount of calories you're getting from that protein and fat. So you can fill that gap with carbohydrates, and the body enjoys using carbohydrates. There is a large group of people that say carbohydrates are the preferred fuel of the body. I don't necessarily have an opinion either way. I just think that they can be a useful tool to fuel the body for certain activities, right? So, replenishing muscle glycogen can be very effective, or is incredibly effective, using carbohydrates. But if you consume a diet that's majority carbohydrates and you're under consuming your proteins and fats required to replenish the body, you will fundamentally be degrading your body over time. And that's because the carbohydrates aren't actually used to rebuild the structures in any other way other than provide the energy to complete the processes. But if you don't have the building blocks to complete, like for those processes won't get completed properly or appropriately, or even get completed full stop.
I just want you to consider, I just wanted you to consider one thing about carbohydrates, right? So when we stop eating carbohydrates, I can't remember what the time length or the time lapse is between your body converting into generating ketones for energy. I don't know if saying ketosis is the correct language, but is it about, I think, 7 days, you begin to start producing ketones, and your body basically uses ketones as an energy source.
Different people. Yeah, it can be as quick as a day, 2 days, 3 days. Different people will have different rates of the switch happening.
There's evidence discussing risks associated with ketones in terms of long exposure to ketones and also high levels of ketones. But these might be abnormalities. It's been a long time since I looked at the data, but have you considered that because that long exposure or high levels of ketones, can that lead to negative health effects?
I'm sure in some cases it can, absolutely. But just because long-term exposure to ketones could cause some issues, that might not just be coming from long-term exposure to ketones, that could be coming from a lack of nourishment, that could be coming from a lack of certain vitamins and minerals or enzymes, cofactors in the person's diet as well. So it's very hard to untangle all of those things. But the reason I say that carbohydrates are non-essential is because they don't fundamentally provide anything that both protein and fat can't provide, right? So fat is a very dense form of energy, and your body can utilize that to fuel itself. That's what ketosis is, right? It's converting the fat into ketones so that then your body can run off the ketones. So we can maintain ourselves off just protein and fat, but we can't maintain ourselves off just carbohydrates. We will fundamentally degrade over time if we just consumed carbohydrates, because we need to ingest proteins and fats, hence why they're essential. Carbs aren't essential, but just because they're not essential doesn't make them bad, right? And it doesn't make them a useful tool. It's just, I think that looking at it through that lens, it gives a lot more context to carbohydrates and the role that they can play in one's nutrition strategy. They definitely shouldn't form the basis of one's nutrition because, again, they're fundamentally non-essential and they typically just provide calories, really, right? There are some nutrients you can get from carbohydrate sources, but there are vast amounts of nutrients that you can only get from the protein and fat sources that you can't get from the carbohydrates.
Yeah, so I agree. I think the majority of people can be in ketosis for an extended period of time, like a chronic period of time, without any adverse health effects. But there's always, the outliers, right? And you brought up another really good point. If you are sufficiently I always fuck this word up.
Nourished.
When you're nutriting yourself, nourishing yourself, yeah.
Nourishing.
Goddamn. If you're adequately nourishing yourself, and you're also in ketosis, generally speaking, you'd probably be all right for long periods of time. So yeah, I agree. There's a lot of evidence out there saying that ketosis can be harmful for the human body, but that's probably in obscure cases or in circumstances where the person is not eating adequately to sustain, their level of or their lifestyle, and that's when they can run into some adverse health effects. And they could also be a cause of something else. It could not just be from the ketones, right? It could also be, it could be something else, or maybe their body just isn't. It's just genetically they're just not equipped to be in ketosis for an extended period of time. That could also be a possibility as well.
Lifestyle matters a lot, but it just as like you just said, there's a lot of evidence to show that being in long-term ketosis can be bad. There's a huge body of evidence that shows how beneficial ketosis can be, especially for those that have metabolic illnesses, right, or metabolic syndromes. Ketosis can be phenomenal. Your brain is majority fat, right? It is majority fat, and the way that fat gets into or crosses the blood-brain barrier is through ketones. So if you want to have a nice, healthy brain that can repair itself and, develop and build neurological connections effectively, being in phases of ketosis can be very beneficial. There's a whole bunch of stuff to get into with that, but that's like way down the tree. But yes, I just think it's a really simple, easy way to think about nutrition in terms of essential and non-essential, and understanding that when something's essential, it means that you must consume a certain amount, right? Once you've hit those levels, you don't need to consume excess amounts of that. You can then use the other macro, which is your carbohydrates, to meet your energy requirements, right? And I think it's just a beautifully simple way to think about nutrition. It's a very easy model that, almost anyone could wrap their head around. And it helps massively with health outcomes as well as performance and, feeling better, having better performance across the board. So when I say, yes, protein and fat are essential, I mean that in terms of we need to consume a certain amount of those things to maintain the structures in our body. Right. And then the non-essential thing, the carbohydrates, that can be used for a fuel. And it's just that simple. You don't have to use it as a fuel because it isn't essential, but you can use it as a fuel, and you can possibly gain some benefit depending on the type of activity that you do or how active you are. It can be a very useful tool, and it can even add to your quality of life. But over-consuming carbohydrates at the cost of under-consuming a protein or a fat or both of them is going to be detrimental to your health long-term, because your body can't fundamentally complete those processes, right? So we've covered a calorie. It's a unit of energy. We've covered the 3 broad macros. You also have another 2 macros that people you can consider, which is fiber and alcohol. And broadly, it's quite easy to just sort of lump these things together in terms of like how many calories per gram of protein, fat, carbohydrates, and alcohol do each of these macros contain, right? So again, calories are a unit of energy. It's a decent coarse graining to say that every gram of protein, right? And this is a coarse graining. So this isn't going to be fundamentally true that every single gram of protein is 4 calories. But broadly, it's a useful model to just say that each gram of protein contains about 4 calories of energy, right? Each gram of fat contains about 9 calories of energy, so more than twice the amount of caloric content per gram, okay? So fat is 9 calories, and a gram of carbohydrates is about 4 calories of energy. Okay. And then you have alcohol, which is 7 calories per gram. Right. So that's the energy content of each of these macronutrients. You can see that there's 2 outliers there, which is fat and alcohol. They're both quite calorically rich. Okay. So you get a lot of bang for your buck, so to speak. So for every gram of fat, you're essentially getting twice the calories for every other thing. And that can be a very good thing, but it can also be a dangerous thing. So it's just important to understand that on average, that's about the caloric content for each of those macros per gram. That's news to you, or you should be pretty familiar with that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that guy. So okay, go ahead.
Moving on from that, how much does a human need to consume of each one of those essentials to start with to maintain their structures, right? How does somebody know how much they should be eating of any of these things? You got a useful model for that?
Basal. The best one I know of is basal metabolic rate. And that, and additionally to that, you can also look at your activity level as well, right? So sedentary, low activity, moderately high, super high activity level. And when you combine the two, when you combine the two models, the BMR with the activity level, you can get a pretty good idea of what your caloric intake or how many calories you're utilizing each day. And then you can sort of build your diet off of that, right? Because your BMR is energy that your body is just utilizing, just living, right? So repairing itself and growing, also just repairing and
Or
bodily
just
functions,
maintaining the processes. That's right, just maintaining the processes. That's BMR.
Yeah. So when you do the BMR calculation, it gives you calories, like it gives you like how many calories your body is utilizing during a 24-hour period. And then if you add on your activity level, which is another calculation you do, and you get another set of calories, you combine those two. And that's like a good starting point for understanding how many calories you should be consuming in a day. I mean, that's the best current model that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you just said, it's a great starting point. So it's a course grading. So it's not going to be perfect for everyone, but it's a good starting point. You can start there and then you can modulate up or down based on you, based on how you respond to all of those things, right? But it only tells you calories, okay? And calories are an incredibly coarse grain, right? That's just looking at the energy. And we just went through that whole process of discussing that it's not just the energy, it's also understanding we need to eat certain things to maintain the structures in our body. So it's not just energy, it's also those macros, right? They contribute energy, but where you're getting that energy from matters as well, right? So then how do people start to develop an understanding of what those calories should consist of in terms of macros?
Yeah, how do people become aware of that? Because not utilities, but for example, most countries will have like the food pyramid, or like they'll have like a food plate. And on that food pyramid or the food plate will be the different categories of food that you should be consuming each day. And with each food category, it gives you examples of different foods that belong to that category. And then when you look at the plate example, it will show you, okay, a percentage of your meal should be from a protein, which could be like, meat, fish. And then another percentage is from carbohydrates, like rice, potatoes, and shit. And then
typically the biggest
other portion,
percentage,
which is vegetables, is vegetables and fruits. And then there's also a space for like dairy as well. And then there's another spot for like sugar. And then there's another one for like junk food, I think now. But the food pyramid, like it has its weaknesses. It's funny because if you ask someone what is eating healthy, they can generally tell you what healthy food is in comparison to food that's not nutritious, right? But for some reason, when it comes time to actually eat nutritious, they don't know what to do because there's no good tools. That's the word, not utilities. The tools provided by like the governing bodies from nutrition in each country, they don't, like, they're okay, but they just don't go that extra to really teach people exactly what they should be consuming. So there's obviously this missing link, right? And it's hard to sort of put myself in that mindset now because I've studied nutrition for a lot of years. But it's weird because if you ask someone who's out of shape, overweight, what healthy food is, they can generally tell you what healthy eating would be. So it's kind of strange that there's like this missing connection.
I have two contentions with some of the things you just said. One, what is healthy food? I don't even know if that's a useful way to think about it. I think it's so contextual. You did say a good thing, which is about nourishing the body. So understanding that some foods have higher nutrient content, different nutrients, and higher nutrient densities than others. But I don't know if there's any food that's intrinsically healthy versus not healthy. That, you know what I mean? Like there are some foods that are definitely designed to not promote health for sure. But I don't know if there are intrinsically, healthy or non-healthy foods. I don't know if that's a useful way to think about it. The food pyramid thing I need to pick up too. So if you invert, like the food pyramid is like this, if you flip it, it's perfect. The food pyramid is way better if you invert it. If the things that it tells you to eat the least amount of, you actually consume more of those things. And the thing that it tells you to consume the most of, which is like grains and cereals, if you consume less of those, you can typically improve health outcomes for the majority of people, right? And to be clear, there is an obesity epidemic. There is a problem with excess weight gain and cardiovascular disease and a whole host of different things that has, only started to emerge since, the advent of this food pyramid and pushing certain products and making them a larger proportion of people's diets.
Oh yeah.
Right? Okay. So how do you figure out how much of each macro should you be consuming to become healthier, to have a body that can do things and maintain itself and thrive in this world, right? So a good way to sort of understand that is understand like, okay, well, how much of your body is made up of proteins, is made up of fats, and how much fuel do you need to fuel those structures, right? And you can use the carbohydrates for that if you want to, or you can use the fats, or you can oscillate between the two. You can go through periods of ketosis, not being in ketosis. You can find what works for you, right? So typically there are recommended daily intakes, right, for things, RDIs, and you'll see that on nutrition labels, and they base it off, a standard caloric intake for the average person is like 2,250 or 2,500 calories a day. But all of these things are averages, right? Because governments and those nutritional governing bodies are doing this at a population level where they're doing an average, and there is no average person, right? We're all unique in some way. There'll be some overlaps, but they do it for an average, and there is no average. Just like there is no average family because there's no 2.3 kids or whatever. All right, so we can understand that. So the RDIs are influenced by a bunch of different factors. But one big factor that influences RDIs is a country's ability to produce foods for their population. And it's become easier in the modern age to farm. Of course, they can't tell their citizens to eat things if they can't provide those things. So, and you can never trust.
Are you talking about the micronutrients?
I'm talking about macros and micros.
Sorry, just to clarify. Right. But the recommended daily intakes, you said IDI. Are you talking about the RDIs, the recommended daily intakes, for example, magnesium and phosphorus and vitamin D and protein? Is that what you're referring to when you say IDI? Because
RDI. I meant to say RDI, so I apologize if I said IDI.
No, it's all good. I think, it might be different between Canada and Australia, but I think in Canada we call it RDI, recommended daily intake. And they have like RDIs for
that's
all
what
macro and micronutrients, right? Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
So I didn't understand your point though. So you're saying that the government, I understand, yeah, that is corrupt, but you're saying that they will push certain RDIs based on what that country is able to import and produce?
Absolutely.
Wow, that's interesting. I never thought about that. That's interesting.
Incentives matter. And
Yeah,
nothing is free
that's
from these sort
interesting.
of biases, prejudices, and those kinds of things. So again, this is why you can look at that and sort of look at what they're doing, but you shouldn't blindly trust what they're saying. They don't necessarily have the individual's best interests at heart. They've got a population level, and they know that they can, essentially get away with doing that, and it doesn't cause complete catastrophe. But it doesn't mean that every individual is thriving. So yeah, like what a country can produce or afford to import will dictate what it recommends. The different companies that are wanting to invest or develop businesses or import things or bring things into their countries will also dictate what gets put onto the recommendations. It's really important. So if you look at the RDI for protein, right, it's like 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, right? That's the RDI. And I would consider that like that is the bare minimum. That's like the lowest, right? And so it's pretty hard for a person to maintain themselves with that level of protein if they're decently active, so to speak. But this way, by having such a low recommendation for the protein and a pretty low one for the fat as well, they've got a lot of room for the carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are cheaper, right? They're essentially cheaper to produce. They're easier to farm at a large scale. You can control the means of production a lot easier, so to speak. You can get more consistency. You can get all that kind of stuff. And with modern farming techniques, with your advent of fertilizers like superphosphate and all these different things, you can increase yields short term, where you're increasing the amount of calories you can get per acre, but you're long term sacrificing the amount of nutrition that is in each of those calories. So you can get more calories, but you end up with less nutrition over time. And this is the modern food problem. Are you fact checking me?
No. I'm actually super interested if there's a possibility that that the RDI or the RDI for carbohydrates has changed over the decades following the introduction of modern industrial food and the introduction of sugars back in the 40s or 50s. I'm just curious if there's some sort of chart that I could look at to see if that has been changed.
Yeah, that's a
Not
very
that
good question.
it would have been correct at the beginning. Yeah, it'd be curious to know, right? Not that I would say that it was ever correct in the beginning, because I agree with you. The food pyramid, if inverted, would be more effective. And it's interesting because I never considered that food companies would be incentivized to sort of push certain RDAs and RDIs to the populace for them to profit from that. I don't know why I didn't consider that before. It makes total sense now that you say that. So because of that, I'm not curious, like, has this changed at all throughout the years? So I'm just trying to do a quick search here to see if I can find anything. Yeah.
I would say yes, it likely has. But the other thing too is like food has been scarce for humans pretty much all of human history. It's only in the last 100 years, etc., that we've actually had access to an abundance of food. Hence the obesity epidemic, right? So yeah, I think there's definitely been a push for higher consumption of carbohydrates, but there's also been the ability to consume higher levels of carbohydrates, right? Like you think, when you were a hunter-gatherer, like it would be incredibly rare to come across an orchard of, fresh fruit trees or something like that. Like you might find one randomly here or one randomly there. What we typically had access to that was a very convenient form of nutrition was animals if they were abundant in that area. Farming farming, although there are different hypotheses on when farming was sort of invented by humans or Homo sapiens, it's a relatively new thing in the evolution of our species, right? Industrial farming. And we've taken it to an extreme now. And with machinery, we've been able to do it at a significantly larger scale. Hence why the incentives to push more of this food onto people, because it's the easier food to produce. And I think we can see that in the differences and the health outcomes now that we're seeing. But I'll let you get a little bit more research on that stuff. We'll dive back into this how to know what you should be eating or how much of each one, right? So a big part of this is understanding, what do you do with your body, right? What do you do with your body on a day-to-day basis? If you're doing, heavy physical work that's requiring the use of lots of your muscles and putting lots of stress on your body physically in that sense, you're going to need more proteins, right? You're going to need more of the building blocks to repair the muscle tissue, to repair the cells that are getting damaged in this physical work, in this hard, strenuous work. You'll also need a certain amount of fat to replenish the cells, to create those phospholipid bilayers, to replenish or repair those neuronal connections, to nourish the nervous system, to do those things. And then you'll also need a certain amount of carbohydrates if you're very physically active, to fuel that physical activity, right? So if you're somebody that then on the inverse side of that doesn't do a huge amount with their body, who spends a lot of their time being sedentary, who isn't doing a lot of physical work, you're not going to need anywhere near the same amount of proteins and or fats and or carbohydrates. You won't even need the same amount of calories, because what you're doing with your body, the demands of your body, are very different to the other person. So it's very individual, right? What one requires. But there are levels, or there are, grams per kilogram that you can set for yourself that are a fantastic base point. And there are some really important ones to understand in terms of fats, in regards to hormonal health. And we can get into that. What have you got up here?
This is just something I quickly found. I don't know if it's like a really good source or not, but this is looking at the USDA food guides between 1916 to 1992. And you can see here it says number of food groups, right? And in 1916, apparently there was 5 food groups, if I read that correctly. And in 1930s, there was 12. I'm not sure if that's if I'm reading that correctly or not. It sounds kind of strange. And then next to that, there's protein-rich foods. And then I think they're labeling carbohydrates as breads. I think.
Yep.
And then you can see in 1916, it says cereals and other starchy foods, 20% calorie, 9 servings, based on 1 ounce or our third cup or a 3/4 cup of a dry cereal serving. 1930s, flours, cereals as desired. And then 1940s, bread, flour, and cereals every day. 1956 to 70s, bread, cereal, 4 or more servings, I'm assuming. And then 1979, I think 4 servings. And then 1984, 6 to 11 servings. Interesting that
So there seems to be an increase.
Wrong, but it seems to be a bit of an increase, right? It went from eating the recommendation was eat it every day, as desired, to 4 servings to 6 to 11 servings in 1984.
And there's a really important point with all of this too, is
about other food groups.
Calories are, of course, graining as well, right? So if you're not getting the nutrition, right, that would typically come with calories, your body could possibly need to consume more calories because it's trying to get those nutrients, right? So there is a school of belief, and I tend to, hold this in my mind as well, is that if you're sufficiently nourished, you possibly don't need as many calories, right? If you have all that nutrition in your body to complete all those processes, you might not need as many calories to maintain your body or your structures. And And so part of the increase in the need for calories, like if people are eating more calories now, could be because they're undernourished, right? And so there's that sort of there's a balance between calories and nourishment, right? And if we just look at it through the calories aspect, we can get blinded. If we just look at it through the nourishment aspect, we might get a bit blinded. So it's about being able to hold both of those in your mind and understanding that they both play a role. And with sufficient nourishment, you could potentially get away with having less calories. I, for myself, have found that to be the case, right? Like when I was bodybuilding, I was eating 7,500 calories a day at some points to gain muscle mass, right? But I wasn't eating the most nourishing foods because I wasn't aware of that concept just yet. And so when I switched to eating more nourishing foods, I could eat a lot less and maintain my structure, right? And now, if I look at how much I consume now versus what I used to consume, I consume significantly less calories, but I can consume significantly more nutritious foods that have higher nutrient density, right? And so because of that, I think because of that, I can get away with eating less calories and my body is still able to maintain itself and the processes. And an awesome side effect of that is I stay a lot leaner year round.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue people run into are those empty calories from sugary foods and sugary beverages. Like
or nutrient poor.
If you're someone who
when you say empty,
soda,
you mean nutrient poor, yeah?
Yeah, nutrient poor.
Yeah.
So like if you take someone who is drinking Coke every day and they're overweight, if they maintain everything else the same and just stop drinking Coke and change to drinking water, that person will lose weight just from making that one simple change. So like if anyone out there is thinking about losing weight and having a really hard time, you literally have to cut out a little bit of sugar intake from your diet and you will begin to lose weight. It is literally that simple. Lower the intake of poorly nutritious foods. And it's interesting because poorly nutritious foods, they do make you hungrier. As from what you said, is because it's not providing you with the nutrients you need. So your body's like, yo, like, yeah, you've put something in me, but this isn't doing anything. So let's continue trying to find more food. So that thing in your brain goes, oh, I'm hungry. That's your body telling you, yo, vitamins, minerals, but you don't necessarily comprehend it that way. You just food. And that's where I think the missing link is. I think that we've kind of got to this conclusion where the tools available aren't necessarily teaching us how to properly eat nutritiously, how to nourish. Finally got the word. Holy fuck. How to nourish ourselves, right? So my question is, how do we then begin to understand how we can sufficiently nourish ourselves? Like, how do you do it?
Okay. So, good points, right? Like definitely good points. One thing I want to say before I answer your question is, with the, like cutting the pop out and cutting out the sugary shit, that's definitely a way to, improve one's health outcomes or lose body fat. But those things aren't inherently bad either, right? Like, they're actually incredibly useful, especially for athletes. So people that have incredibly high output, I think we've discussed this before on the pod, but like Michael Phelps, when he was swimming, at his peak level, he was having to consume like 10,000 calories a day just to fuel his workouts, right? Because he was doing so much physical activity, right? That requires a lot of energy. So products like that, like your Cokes and your processed foods, can be incredibly useful for people like that, but not for your everyday person. Like most people don't have that kind of output, so it's crazy that they're consuming these foods. They're so easy to overconsume, but for an athlete, that's a really useful thing in times of high output. But for others, not. Anyway, so just to clarify that stuff. Okay, so for me, how do I do it? Well, this is a question that I spent a long time trying to understand, right? And I've gone through many different versions of how to answer this and a model to use. And the model that I currently use is the following, right? So I look to myself and I think there is this balance between digestion and available energy for your brain, right? When you eat a lot of energy goes towards digestion, okay? And there is this brain-gut axis or sharing of the energy systems. So when you're when you're spending a lot of energy on digestion, you take the available energy that could otherwise be used for cognition, and it goes towards digestion. So I want to balance that, right? That this is part of the model that I use. So I want to balance that. So I want to eat the most nourishing foods, and I want to minimize the digestion that I have to do for those foods, right? So I want to, because I want to be nourishing my body, and I want to make sure I have a good amount of cognitive capacity. So I try and pick foods that are nutrient dense, right? And there are lots of nutrients that we need to be mindful of across that broad spectrum. But if we start at the top, we go high level, okay? So I think, what are the essentials? So it's protein and fat. I start with fat because there is a certain threshold that's been well researched that if you drop below a certain percentage of fat in your diet, dietary intake of fat, your hormonal system really suffers, and it can have detrimental effects on your hormonal system. You stop being able to synthesize certain hormones, and hormones are incredibly important for the processes within your body, right? So I make sure, so the threshold that I've been aware of and found through the research is about 20%, right? So you want to get at least 20% of your calories each day from fat. Right? Now, the kinds of fat that you choose also matters. So within fat, there are subcategories of fats. And I typically pick omega-3s, saturated fats, and then some polys, right? So polyunsaturated fats. Okay, so that's something, a bit like an olive oil or something like that. I typically don't eat many monounsaturated fats, which is like pig fat, macadamia nuts and things like that. They're more monos. So I try to consume predominantly saturated, omega-3s, and your polys. Omega-3s, ideally you're getting them from whole food sources. So good sources of these things are like wild caught salmon, sardines, different fishes. You can also get some plant-based ones. I don't think they're as good, but you can utilize them as well.
I don't know if you can.
Which?
Get it from any plant sources. There's been arguments for and against, but I don't know. I think
yes.
No. I think that you from what though? From what can you get omega-3 from? What plant source can get you that?
So people like to say that you can get it from chia, and you can get precursors to omega-3s from flax seeds and things like that. I'm the same as you. I tend to think no. I tend to think no. I was just trying to be, I don't know, politically correct or whatever. I was trying to not be so harsh. I'm not trying to push my super biases heavily, if that makes sense. But, my experience with the plant-based sources hasn't been as good as with what I would consider to be the animal-based sources, right? I'm a huge proponent. I love, sardines. I love wild salmon. I love if I can get decent wild-caught fishes that have a decent fat content. I love eating those. That's what I'll typically go for in terms of trying to get my omega-3s. And even, don't even get me started on smoked cod liver. Oh my God. Smoked cod liver is like the foie gras of the ocean. It is like a delicious omega-3 pate. I smash mad smoked cod liver.
Yeah,
so
still haven't tried
things
it.
like that is where I try to get mine. It's so good. Anyway, I try to get mine from that. So I start with the fats. Okay, so I make sure at the very least, right, I'm getting 20% of my calories every day from fats. And like I said, I tend to block them into those three categories: my saturated, my omega-3s, and my polyunsaturated, right? So that's a decent amount of olive oil. It's a decent amount of the fish or fish oils. And then I eat fatty, wild, grass-fed meats. And you can also get omega-3s from those sources as well, right? So if your cows are eating a diverse diet of nice vegetables and plant matter, they'll also have omega-3s in their fat. Right, so that's the fat. I make sure at the very least I'm getting 20% of my calories from fat. I like to bump it up a bit to just have a bit of a buffer there. And I probably go between 25 to 30% of my calories are from those fats, right?
Yeah.
And again, this isn't a fixing. It's just
I just have
that's
one
what I don't
question
go
about your
below.
fat intake.
Yeah.
Okay. You try to stay away from mono saturated fats.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I found for myself, I don't feel great when I consume a large amount of them. I find that if I consume too many of them, it affects my digestive system. It makes me go to the toilet. I don't have the solid stool that I would typically have. It's not as pleasant, and I just don't feel as good. So I like to do similar to what you do. I do like an intuitive thing. I try and get very in tune with my body and see how the different things that I consume affects how I feel, my performance, mood, all of those different things. And I've just found that over time, if I'm being real with myself, so to speak, monos don't agree with me as much. And so I just minimize them. And it's not, I don't completely eliminate them. I just don't actively try and consume many of them.
Right.
So I wouldn't go below 20% fats. But for me on a day-to-day basis, it's at least between 25 and 30% of my calories come from those fats, or come from fats. And from those fats, it's that subset of fats, right? Then I move to protein because I'm doing the essentials first, and then I can use the non-essentials as my lever for activity, right? So then for protein, I weight train, right? I like to weight train hard. I definitely don't weight train as hard as I used to train, but I like to be physically active. I like to have a robust body. I want to have a body that's able to handle lots of adversity, handle volatility well, right? Like I don't want to be fragile. I don't want to accidentally kick my toe and break my toe or whatever, I don't want to run into something and it hurts me, or, I want to break shit if I run into something. I want to be able to, run and tumble and fall and do all the cool shit and be okay. Right. So, and muscle is, it provides tension across the bones to maintain your structure. Right. And it's like a form of padding and armor that you can wear. Right. And it also increases your physical ability. So I'm down for that. Right. So I make sure that I eat a decent amount of protein. So for me, I typically eat about 1.8 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of my body weight. Now, I'm a decently lean person. Like I don't carry a lot of excess fat. Like you can visible, abs, those kinds of things. So my lean body mass is quite high, right? The percentage of me that is lean muscle mass is quite high because I'm not carrying a lot of excess fat. So for me, that works out to be a really good amount, between 1.8 to 2.2. Now, if I'm going to be doing lots of super hard physical activity or using my muscles a lot, I could crank that up a bit. I could crank it up to like 2.3, 2.5. And for some athletes, if you're really using your muscles and you're really going through like physically strenuous stuff, taxing on your musculature and your physical systems, you could crank that up to like 3, right? 3 grams per kilogram, but that's a lot. And you might not need to stay there. At different times, you might need different levels, okay? So on average for me, it's 1.8 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So for me, I weigh about 120 kilos, right? So if we do that, just average it out to be 2 grams per kilogram. That's 240 grams of protein a day, right? And 240 grams of protein a day is a solid amount of meat. Like if you're eating, that's like 83 grams of protein. Yeah. If you're eating 3 meals, that's like 83 grams of protein per meal. 83 grams of protein per meal is probably like a 300 gram serving of meat plus whatever, carbohydrates you're eating as well. So it's a decent amount. So, but I'm a bigger guy and I do a lot of physical activity with my body. So your average person might not need that much. And then whatever calories I have left for that day, depending on how active I am, I just fill that with carbohydrates. So because I solve for the fat, I know where to start with the fat because we know from huge amounts of evidence and studies on people that if people don't consume a certain amount of fat, it wrecks their hormonal system, right? It wreaks havoc. The hormonal system can't complete those processes properly. And your cellular structure starts to suffer because of that inability to make that nice phospholipid bilayer on those cells. Starts to break down. We can start there. And once you solve for that, you can then solve for the protein and then you can solve for the carbs. It's very simple. That kind of makes sense?
Yeah. What's your model based on then? Is just trial and error and what you found that works best for you? Or did you read up on these percentages and this strategy somewhere?
It's lots of trial and error, obviously. A bunch of research as well. But I would say to summarize it easily, it started with, I got into health and fitness, started going to university to understand these things. I was like a child athlete, that kind of thing. And then I had some injuries. And so I got into weight training to rehabilitate, got heavy into the weight training because, I thought my sporting career was over because of injuries. I was like, I can do this weight training. This is really fun. Got into the competitive side of powerlifting, bodybuilding specifically, like lots of bodybuilding. Wanted to do the competitions. You have to do your dieting, all that kind of stuff. I went through all of that horrible, depriving yourself, binging, that whole like terrible side of bodybuilding, right? That I don't know if it's a bit of body dysmorphia, but also a lack of understanding. And then through all of that, error, trial and tribulation, all of that sort of stuff, realizing, no wonder I was fucking craving all this crazy stuff because I was eating no fat, right? No wonder I felt like shit, even though like I looked like I was the best shape of my life. It's because I was eating no fat. And then I started to learn these things. But yeah, my model is just really, it is based off trial and error within myself, a lot of how I can feel, but a huge amount of research on like, what can we know about the human body to a certain degree? Like if we are to take it seriously that we are made of things, and that, we believe in the models of the atoms and all this. And we know we just went through observer theory and it's just one way to look at it. But I found it to be very useful for helping me in my life. But yeah, honestly, it starts with the fat. That's the crazy thing. So a lot of people, it starts with the protein. But for me, I like to start it at the fat because we can know that, if you don't hit those levels, bad shit happens to your hormonal system. And hormones are really, really important for the processes in your body, like super fucking important. So that's where I've essentially got that from. And then if you look broadly across the literature, you sort of see like, okay, this is essentially like, lots of people are sort of arriving at these levels. They're realizing that this is actually a good model for that. And again, there's always going to be little nuances for everyone in between, but like these are good starting points.
You a fan of avocado?
I don't mind avocado. I eat it occasionally, but it's not like a massive thing that I smash a lot of. There are foods that I definitely love, right? I love good quality red meat. I love certain kinds of fish. Like I just mentioned, like I'm a huge cod liver fan. Smoked cod liver is just heavenly. I love sardines.
I gotta try that.
I smash sardines regularly. I love eggs. Good quality eggs. Like I love eggs so much. We had chickens. We sold our house, and the people who bought the house really wanted our chickens, so we got rid of the chickens. But that is something that I will have at every one of my houses is chickens. We will always have our own chickens because they're ridiculous. Like, and your own eggs, you can feed them what you would like, them to consume, and then that helps to nourish the eggs that you get. So I smash eggs. I love a good olive oil. Like I just mentioned, I love good quality red meat. I eat a bit of chicken, not a huge amount. I'm more of a red meat guy. I love wild caught game, like I'm a big fan of deer or venison, things like that. But yeah, I love berries, specifically blueberries. If you have like pine trees or somewhere in your house, like around where you live, you can plant blueberries underneath the pine trees. They love the acidic soil. You can grow the most ridiculously delicious blueberries. I smash mad blueberries. I try and eat them on the regular. Big fan of like cranberries and pomegranates. Love eating that stuff. Fermented things, I'm a huge fan of like kimchi, sauerkraut, those kinds of things. Understanding that bacteria plays a role in your body as well. So nourishing those things within your body or feeding them. Broths, I love bone broths and things like that. But yeah, I go for nourishment. Like I said, I try and eat foods that have the highest nutrient density, not calories, but nutrient density, and that require the least amount of digestion. And I found for me that works really well. Right. So when I was younger, I got diagnosed with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, which is like a digestive illness, disease. And they told me I'd have to be on medication for the rest of my life, all these different things. And so I had lots of issues with that, like gluten intolerance and things like that. And so I also had to learn, because I wanted to feel better. I didn't want to feel like shit. I didn't want to have to be on medication for the rest of my life. And so by, taking a mindful approach to this and paying attention and trying to understand this, I've been able to get rid of all of those things. I don't have those issues anymore. I don't take medication. I don't suffer from the same issues that I used to suffer from with that digestive thing. And now if I get tested, I don't represent as having Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. I just don't show for it anymore, purely because I'm not pissing my body off.
Nice.
Right? I'm not eating shit that pisses my body off.
Nice.
And last point with the macros.
Yeah, buddy, good job.
Yeah, makes it. It's a big thing, and it's empowering for people to realize that they can do this. Like that's why I'm passionate about these kinds of things, is because I've lived it for myself. So I broke down the fats into the saturated, the omega-3s and the polys. And the omega-3s tie into the polys anyway, but I just wanted to isolate omega-3s because I think they're very important. On the protein side, not all proteins are created equal. So if you look at what a protein is, we're just saying it's protein, right? Like we're saying it's one thing. But as we've discussed many times, no thing is just one thing, right? It's always made up of many different things. And so a protein broadly is made up of amino acids. And so there are different amino acids that make up protein, right? Or make up proteins. And not all protein sources are created equal. Not all protein sources contain what we call essential amino acids. So within protein, right, there is amino acids, and within amino acids, there is essential and non-essential amino acids, right? So eggs are considered a complete protein. They contain the spectrum of amino acids that are essential for the human body. Red meat is more of a complete protein than your other sources. Certain fishes will have higher percentages or proportions of essential versus non-essential. Pork is typically deficient in some essential amino acids. So pork, you have to be careful if you consume a lot of pork. You'll be missing out on some amino acids that are important. And have I missed a source? Like something like turkey, right? Turkey is higher in tryptophan. Tryptophan is a precursor to melatonin in the human body, fantastic for sleep. It's also why people recommend that you should possibly, eat turkey in the evening, or why at Thanksgiving you have a better sleep than you might normally have, because you're getting that extra tryptophan. So again, within each of these sort of broad categories, there are subcategories that have many leaves. And I think we'll endeavor to go in depth into these things with a clearer model in future podcasts. What do you reckon, Guy?
Yo, hell yeah, dude. I love nutrition, and I love talking about this. Yeah, bro.
So,
all right, guys,
to wrap, do you want to?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but do you want to mention anything about your model?
Like how I go about building my nutrient intake.
Yeah. Do you even think about it very much, or you just sort of eat whatever?
I don't think about it that much, because I've just gotten it's just like second nature to me now, like I know what works, and that's all I buy. Like when I go to buy meat, I know already what cut of meat I'm going to get. I know how many kilograms of that I'm going to need for the month. And then I do the same for chicken, I do the same for certain fish. I don't like fish that much, but I'll eat it anyways because it's good. Sometimes I get tuna. And then when it comes to like vegetables and fruits, like I'm big on papaya, avocado, broccoli. Those are like the main things I stick to. And eggs, dude, I eat a shit ton of fucking eggs, bro. Every single day I'm eating eggs. It's like the one food source that no matter what, I eat every single day. And
big fan of eggs.
Basically the same for me month to month. Yeah, I don't really change. I found what I'm eating now works for me, and I just sort of stick to that. But yeah, it's like what you did over the years. You just begin to learn what works and what doesn't, and just understanding nutrition because we studied it, and then also being in that world of bodybuilding, you get to understand your body as well. Because when you're putting your body under like a lot of stress, you're just forced to understand like what works in terms of what's the word? I almost said monetizing. When what's the word? When you do something at the same time, like you do one task and you have like another task going on at the same time, optimizing time. So you just learn how to optimize.
Yeah. No, I agree.
What were you gonna say? Yeah.
Also,
that's it.
Yeah. When I say like, so my model, like broadly, I'd categorize it as, like I think about optimizing, like providing my body with the essential things it needs. So I eat for maximum nourishment and I try to minimize digestion and I prioritize whole foods, right? And I try and consume things that are as untouched, right? Or unadulterated as possible to get the base nutrition in. And then I can utilize other things to supplement that if I need to, right? Now, we just covered the calories, the protein, the fat, the carbs, right? But there is a whole spectrum of things that we need to get to. There's many branches that we want to go down. So there is also electrolytes, understanding the role and importance of electrolytes, understanding hydration, understanding light exposure to darkness, understanding breath work, and all of these things, they all come together to create a space, right? And that's where you can have health, right? Or dis-ease, right? If you're missing some of those or you're imbalanced, you will have dis-ease. But if you can get all of those to balance between each other, you can create the space of health. And so, yes, this is just the first of many discussions regarding nutrition, health, exercise, sleep, light exposure, all of those things. I can link a very good document that I developed and wrote on this subject, which is the sort of pillars for health, right? Like the minimum prescription for health. Like what are the core things that us as humans, what are the core things we should do to give ourselves the best chance of living a healthy life or minimizing dis-ease? And it covers all of those topics and it gives a good overview of that. So I'll send it to you and you can link it in the show notes, Guy. But if you have any questions regarding nutrition, feel free to drop them in the comments. If we made a mistake or talk shit and you disagree, let us know also. We will be doing a couple more on this. We'll also be revisiting the observer theory stuff and continuing to delve down there. But we just thought we'd mix it up today, a bit of nutrition, a bit of how to understand that a bit better. If things weren't clear and you want more clarity on anything, please drop a comment, let us know. Otherwise, have a lovely rest of the night, Guy. Viewers, enjoy the rest of your morning, day, evening, or night. Peace.
Love you, bro. Peace.
Love you too, Guy. Bye.